Film follows the experiences of a young American soldier Hector during his deployment to Iraq. The narrative is largely driven by his first-person account, complemented by home videos he and his fellow soldiers filmed during their time overseas. The film opens with Hector recounting a phone call he made to his father after a car bomb hit a camp near his unit. He describes his own emotional turmoil and the fear he felt trying to sound tough while shedding tears. This raw vulnerability immediately establishes the film's tone, contrasting the bravado of a young soldier with the harsh realities of war. He then vividly describes a patrol on MSR Tampa, a main supply route. He recalls his fear and reluctance to exit the Humvee at the scene of a recent car bombing where he saw pieces of charred meat everywhere. His Sergeant Dean orders him to start picking pieces up, a moment that shatters his innocence. He describes seeing a charred torso and the chaos of the scene, with Iraqi National Guardsmen crying, screaming, and beating civilians out of anger. The film then takes a step back to Hector's decision to join the army at a young age, needing his parents' permission. Despite his father's pleas for him to go to college, Hector was determined. He recalls his mother and sister's emotional reaction when he left for boot camp in San Diego. The movie shows him as a young naive recruit full of ambition and believing he was ready to take on the world. This section includes a recitation of the infantryman's creed, highlighting the idealistic and intense training soldiers receive. The narrative returns to his deployment, specifically to Germany, where he received news that his unit, the 1st Infantry Division, was going to Iraq. The initial fear of the unknown and the pressure of not letting his brothers down are palpable. He introduces his fellow soldiers through a series of personal home videos showing their camaraderie and daily lives, from mundane tasks like pulling guard to light-hearted pranks. He describes arriving at Forward Operating Base, FOB, Paliwoda, and the left seat right seat patrols with the veteran 4th Infantry Division soldiers. He's struck by their salty appearance and their practical grim advice about combat, such as needing to shoot insurgents multiple times to take them down. This debunks the Hollywood notion of war and introduces the use of meth by foreign fighters, making them even harder to stop. The film captures the routine of life on the FOB, including the constant threat of indirect fire. Hector describes the sound of incoming and outgoing rounds, a terrifying sound that eventually became background noise. A particularly intense scene details a rocket attack that caught him and 3 friends off guard while walking to the internet cafe. They scrambled for cover behind concrete barriers, laughing out of a sense of fatalism and helplessness. The film also shows the interactions with the local Iraqi population. He describes the language barrier and the difficulty of distinguishing between civilians and insurgents, recalling a moment when they searched a house and found an AK-47 despite the residents' claims of no sila. A humorous moment features a local Iraqi man expressing his desire to marry an American woman and move to America because of the freaky freak lifestyle. The climax of Hector's personal account is the first time he fired his weapon in combat. He was on the toilet during a mortar attack when he was called to a Quick Reaction Force (QRF) mission to find the Mortarman. A chase ensues, ending in a rural village. He and his team chase 3 military-age males, and after firing warning shots, Hector shoots one of them from a distance. He describes the moment he saw the man fall and the subsequent realization that the red slick blood on the man's dress was not mud. He feels his hands slip on the man's body as he goes to search him, a moment that encapsulates the gruesome reality of his actions and the loss of his innocence. The film ends with a montage of the soldiers' home videos showing them on patrol, joking around and documenting their experience. The final shots and the narrative's conclusion emphasize the profound and lasting impact of these experiences on the soldiers, forever changing their perception of themselves and the world. The movie is a deeply personal and raw account of a young American soldier's tour of duty in Iraq, presented through his own narration and a collection of personal video clips. It begins with the narrator Hector reflecting on a profound moment of lost innocence. He recounts a phone call to his father after a car bomb incident where he struggled to maintain a tough facade while admitting his fear and desire to leave. This early moment establishes the film's core theme, the chasm between the soldier's public image and his private emotional reality. Hector's story unfolds in vivid, unvarnished detail. He describes being on patrol on MSR Tampa, a major supply route, and arriving at a scene of utter carnage following a vehicle bombing. He recalls his overwhelming reluctance to get out of the Humvee, overwhelmed by the sight of pieces of charred meat and human remains scattered everywhere. His sergeant's order to start picking pieces up forces him to confront the grim reality of war head-on, an experience he likens to a living nightmare. The chaos of the scene is further heightened by the actions of the Iraqi National Guardsmen, who in their grief and rage are seen beating civilians. The narrative then shifts back in time to show Hector's journey to the military. He was so young he needed his parents' permission to enlist. He dismisses his father's pleas to attend college, driven by a youthful, almost naive desire to prove himself. The film shows his initial enthusiasm and sense of purpose, exemplified by his proud recitation of the infantryman's creed and the feeling of accomplishment upon completing his rigorous training. This initial bravado stands in stark contrast to the seasoned, weary soldier he later becomes. When he deploys to Germany and learns his unit is bound for Iraq, the fear of the unknown begins to creep in. He documents his fellow soldiers through a series of casual video clips capturing their camaraderie and the mundane reality of military life on an operating base. He contrasts their fresh faces with the salty and worn appearance of the veteran soldiers they replaced who had been in the country for months and offered blunt, cynical advice about combat. He learns that the reality of fighting is far different from what is portrayed in movies, a lesson cemented by the sheer terror of a rocket attack that forces him and his friends to laugh in the face of death. First time Hector fires his weapon in combat. He describes the horrific scene of the wounded man, the slick red blood on his hands, and the panic of a medic who realizes the gravity of the man's neck wound. The other soldiers in his squad regroup, but the second insurgent they were chasing vanishes into a hostile village, a place where people's hate radiating from their souls is palpable. They see pictures of Saddam Hussein, a detail that immediately makes them feel out of place and uneasy. A sense of impending danger forces them to withdraw. On their way back to the vehicles, Hector encounters the wounded man's family, including his father, who shakes Hector's hand in a moment of confusing and deeply unsettling acceptance. Back at the base, the military sends a chaplain to debrief the soldiers. However, Hector and his comrades, hardened by their experiences, refuse to show any sign of weakness, believing it could be fatal. The film contrasts this with video footage of a fellow soldier, PFC Zimmerman, showing off a piece of shrapnel from an IED that nearly hit him, boasting about having killed someone. The narrative takes a turn to recount the story of Doc Daklan, the platoon's compassionate medic. Hector recalls their first meeting, where Doc bandaged a cut on his hand with a gentle, caring demeanor. This memory makes the tragic events that follow even more poignant. The platoon is on patrol when the last vehicle breaks down. Hector's vehicle is sent back to assist a decision that inadvertently saves his life. While they are a mile away, a massive explosion followed by gunfire shakes the ground. They realize the rest of the patrol continued on and was hit. They race back to find a scene of devastation. An insurgent detonated an IED as Doc stepped in front of a Humvee, blowing him across the road. Hector sees Doc's body and in that moment feels his innocence irrevocably shattered. He recounts looking down at Doc's face, which is largely unharmed but covered in blood, and then seeing his exposed shinbone, a detail that makes the reality of the situation sink in. The chaos of the scene continues as Hector and the remaining soldiers have to pull security even as reinforcements arrive and a medevac helicopter lands. He describes shooting warning shots at approaching civilian vehicles, one of which turns out to be driven by a blind and deaf old man. In their fear and rage, the soldiers rough him up before letting him go. The film then details the aftermath of Doc's death. They follow the wire from the IED to the insurgents' position and later learn that the area was bombed. Hector feels immense guilt and a heavy burden. The date of Doc's death, September 10th, falls on his mother's birthday, forcing him to compartmentalize his grief to spare her. He confesses his feelings of being a murderer to his parents during his RNR, a moment he attributes to the loosening effect of alcohol. This confession reveals his deep-seated struggles with the religious beliefs he grew up with. Following his return, Hector descends into a years-long struggle with substance abuse, using a cocktail of alcohol, marijuana, cocaine, and meth to cope with his untreated post-traumatic stress disorder. He describes his life as a roller coaster from hell, where he felt like an alien in his own home and engaged in self-sabotaging behavior. He finally hits rock bottom in 2012 after a car accident leaves him feeling upset that he survived. His father, frustrated and at his wits' end, takes him to the VA hospital. In the hospital, Hector begins his long journey toward recovery. He learns about his condition and the scientific reasons for his struggles. A key moment of clarity comes when a doctor explains that accepting Doc's death doesn't mean agreeing with it, but simply acknowledging that it happened. This simple reframing allows him to finally begin to heal. The film concludes on a hopeful note, showing Hector reconnecting with his fellow soldiers years later. He attends a Veterans Day event where he sees an old friend and shares a powerful moment of mutual understanding, realizing they both made it. He takes his daughter to visit his military brothers, introducing her to them and reflecting on their shared history. The movie ends with more video footage from their time in Iraq, a mix of mundane, funny, and chaotic moments, underscoring the complex and enduring bond forged by their shared experience. If you enjoy watching this video, then subscribe to Angel Recaps for the latest movies explanation.